Hey guys, welcome to another video on setting up your workflow, this time using the Novation Launchkey. This is a 49 key MIDI controller which is fully integrated with Ableton Live. It has amazing hands-on functionality so you can really get into your flow without having to stare at your computer screen. I'm going to start today using a groove that I created in the last video on the Launchpad X, so go check that out if you haven't already, and let's go.
So I've got a few instruments set up in the session view on Ableton Live. This lit up pad represents my drum groove on a drum rack track, which you can now hear. I usually use these track arrow buttons to toggle back and forth between different tracks, and the LED screen is super helpful telling me which devices I've gotten loaded up. The arm or select button also helps me move from track to track, and I usually use this to record different tracks while I'm adding layers into the session view. I have a polyphonic synth loaded up on the second track of my Ableton session view. Now that I've gotten two variations for my synth, legato and the staccato version, I have record armed my bass track and I'm going to record another layer over this groove. Pretty happy with that as a starting point, but before I add another layer, I'm going to use Shift to switch my fader functionality to volume mode so I can balance out my levels. Once happy with the levels, I jam out some ideas on a sampled mallet. I use Capture MIDI, which automatically saves what I've played into a clip in my session view, even though I didn't hit record. And using the solo button, I can now listen back to what I've captured. My composition process when I'm working in the box involves using a bunch of effects so that I can sound design as I go. I use the track arrow buttons to move to the polyphonic synth on my second channel. And now I've already gotten a few devices previously loaded up on this track. The first thing that I need to do is hold down Shift and switch my fader functionality to device mode. Then holding down device select, I can use the arrow buttons to move through the various devices that are already loaded up on the track. I've currently selected the auto filter and I'm going to solo the synth track so that we can clearly hear the effect of the filter on the sound of the synth. I play with the levels of the frequency, resonance and LFO amount from the auto filter device in order to create variations of the synth sound. I quite like the sound of that altogether, and now I'm going to use device lock to lock the parameters of auto filter to my faders. I now switch to volume mode to make some adjustments with my mallet levels and the levels of the synth, and when I switch back into device mode, my fader functionality is still locked to my auto filter's parameters. Another tool I've been recently using to generate melodies is the ARP function. Holding down the Shift button, I'm going to switch latch to on, and I'm activating the ARP mode, which means that I can now play a chord, and once I release the keys, the ARP is latched. Holding down the Shift button allows me to access various settings of the ARP right from the keyboard itself. Things like the rate or the octave. I can also switch to deviate or mutate mode, and turning the knob mutate allows me to add more notes into the ARP, whereas deviate will allow me to add more rests. This allows me to come up with melodic ideas I wouldn't have thought of on my own. I simply switch from track to track to audition various instruments playing the same ARP, including the option of multiple instruments playing one ARP at the same time. The chord mode is an amazing choice for ideas that are not only melodic but also rhythmic and percussive in nature. Holding down the shift button, I can now tweak the deviate or gate functions so that the rhythm of the arp sits better within the pocket of my groove. This inbuilt arp function also works in standalone mode and is a great tool for generating ideas if you feel like you've hit a creative block. In my mind, everybody loves an arp, and now adding all the elements together, I'm just messing with some of the settings to find something that feels right, and just having a bit of fun.
So that's what my workflow looks like when I'm using a controller that gives me access to not only keys but also pads, knobs and faders. It allows you to stay away from the computer and get fully into the flow. If you found this video helpful, let me know, and happy music making.